Okay, hi everyone. So those of you who don't know, the Matthew Project is primarily a Norfolk-based organisation which works with adults and young people with their substance misuse issues, so drugs and alcohol. Now, I work for the part of the organisation called Unity, which is the Young People Service. So within that service, we really have two distinct services. So we work with young people under the age of 19, where their substance use, they're recognising it's causing an issue for them or a worry, and they want to get help and support. And we also work with young people who have been impacted by someone else's substance misuse, which primarily, again, is parental substance use, but it can be some sort of significant other as well. So that's what I'm primarily here kind of talking about, is that part of the service, so the young people's part of the service. If anyone wants any more information about the Matthew Project, please come and see me. We've got a sort of stand upstairs, so please come and sort of see us there as well if you want a bit more about some of the other services the Matthew Project provides. So you can see sort of some of the things that we do, sort of other health matters, which is impacted by substance misuse. We can help those young people as well. We also provide a bit of consultation and support for parents, for other professionals. So if there's concern about someone's substance misuse, young persons, then we can do that as well. There we go. So we do a bit of education in kind of special education schools as well, a bit of training, and as I say, it's a kind of a team that sort of spans the whole of Norfolk. So we have bases in Norwich, Great Yarmouth, and Kingston as well, but we see young people wherever they feel most comfortable. So we provide, it's basically an outreach service. It's based on a one-to-one model. Some of the young people who've been impacted by parental substance misuse, we also provide occasional kind of group activities as well. So in kind of holidays, half terms, kind of diversionary activities, just to go and have fun. So we provide that as well. And we're also working kind of partnership with other organisations, so Norfolk Family Carers and NSFT as well. Okay, so often when we think about substance misuse, we think about the user, and sometimes we don't think the impact kind of beyond that, or who else substance misuse could be impacting as well. So again, I'm not going to go into loads of details, but just by looking at this, it makes us think about how substance misuse can impact kind of all our lives as well. It's not often that someone will go through their lives where they haven't had their life impacted in some way or another by substance misuse, whether that's a friend, a family member, local communities, working in A&E departments. We see it, every day, and it surrounds us every day, doesn't it? We think about alcohol readily available, so it's there, sort of. And something that we need to kind of, think about how it impacts us. And primarily today, I'm thinking about how it impacts young people and neurodiversity as well, which I'll come on to in a moment or two. And again, this is just one model in terms of kind of a spectrum of substance misuse as well, or drugs, however you want to, whichever terminology that you want to use. And there are different ways that people might use them, and the kind of the harms that they can cause as well. So we look at things around kind of that sort of casual, non-problematic use. Some people might determine that as kind of recreational use. Some young people see drugs as kind of benefit, whether that's prescribed medication or actually in terms of their sort of drug of choice, using it as a way of perhaps helping them in one way or another. And then it moves kind of chronic dependence use, or kind of that problematic use where it's having a significant impact on them or someone else's life as well. And just to be clear, just because someone starts off kind of with that recreational use, it doesn't mean that they're going to end up in the chronic dependence or the problematic use. Okay, very few young people, that does happen to. Most young people will kind of grow out of their drug use, and it doesn't go on to cause kind of problematic for them or other people as well. Okay. So, in terms of substance use, again, going back to the other slide, it's often not in kind of isolation. Not often we have people just pick up a drug and just take it and not know, and we don't think of the reasons kind of behind that as well. There's lots of other things to kind of consider. Okay, so There's lots of things in the mix with substance misuse. So there's lots of things around kind of stigma and shame in terms of substance misuse. So in terms of the work that we do with our Affected Others work, you know, young people are worried or scared to come forward, not want to talk about what's going on at home because of the shame or the stigma that's potentially attached to that. So some of the work we try and do is around kind of dispelling that kind of stigma, okay? Things around kind of trauma we work with in terms of young people, kind of previous experiences and being kind of knowledgeable and aware, having an awareness about that. Their background can really help in terms of the work that we do. We're obviously aware of some of the kind of physical difficulties that people may have if they go on to use substances problematically, both long-term and short-term as well. The links between kind of mental health and substance misuse is huge as well, and I'll go on to talk a little bit about that further on. Again, adverse childhood experiences, trauma can have an impact on people's kind of whether they go on to use drugs in a problematic way or experiment with it as well. And lastly, we are sort of the main part of today is talk about kind of neurodiversity and the kind of links between substance misuse and neurodiversity as well, and why some young people who are neurodiverse may kind of navigate themselves to using substances. Okay, so that's part of what I'm going to talk about today as well. Okay, so some of you may have heard co-occurring alcohol or drug conditions. Okay, now historically, some people might have heard of the term dual diagnosis, which basically is around co-occurring mental health and drug and alcohol issues. Now, I listened to the talk about ADHD, and someone made a point of it's really hard when people have co-occurring conditions is to be able to find the right treatment, because sometimes what will happen is kind of sort of mental health support. Well, you can't get help for your mental health because you need to sort your substance misuse out. But obviously they go in, you know, for us they go in hand, and you can't treat one basically without the other. I'm sure you'll agree. And in terms of just in terms of dual diagnosis, we talk about all sort of substances within that as well, including tobacco, including alcohol, and levels of kind of use as well, and it covers all kind of mental health problems as well, so both common and severe mental health and personality disorders as well. So I think what we're trying to do is kind of move away from the kind of dual diagnosis, because it sort of dual means two, doesn't it? And actually it's far more complicated than that, and we're going beyond that as well. So we want to look beyond mental health and include kind of neurodiversity in some of our work as well, and kind of recognising the impact that that can have on young people's drug use. So some of our data, so 65% identified as having anxiety, low mood or depression, 40% of our young people, so this, sorry, just to be clear, this is for people who are using substances, so that's in with that cohort of young people. 40% expressed having suicidal thoughts or are self-harming, and 35 were identified as neurodiverse, with ADHD and ASD being the most common diagnosis. Okay, so this is something I think, you know, the last sort of few years, thinking about actually it's not just about kind of mental health and substance misuse. Well, that still is, you know, that is still there and something that we still see, but actually thinking about those who are neurodiverse and thinking about how we can adapt what we do to support those children and young people as well. Okay, so why do young people use substances? There are many reasons. Now, one of the things, going back to the other slide we talked about in terms of thinking about why they might use, in terms of kind of self-medicate. We talked about young people often having come from sort of trauma backgrounds, adverse childhood experiences, and a way of dealing with some of those kind of worries, anxieties, stress, those low moods, is to use substances, because it helps people forget about it for a short while, and that's kind of that escapism that we see the young people in our service. That's some of the reasons why they may use that. Now, for them, it's not meaning that it solves all their issues, but actually just to have that bit of escapism for a short period of time is something they're looking for, to give them some sort of kind of relief as well. So neurodiversity, can intersect with problematic substance misuse. People who are neurodiverse seek kind of self-medication with drugs occasionally and or alcohol, and it helps them mask their behaviour when amongst neurotypical people as well. Okay, so just as an example, so in terms of autism, so social situations and sensory can make autistic people feel stressed and anxious. Some autistic people might also use or even become reliant on alcohol or drugs to mask their autistic characteristics just to kind of fit in. And if we think about it for ourselves, some of us go into social situations and find that difficult, don't we? And I'm sure we know people who do and may use alcohol as a way of kind of helping them relax or building a bit of confidence to be able to go kind of talk to people or wanting to be someone else for a short while. So that's no different really. People, for example, here with autism, kind of masking that or wanting to kind of fit in and having something else that they can kind of use to mask that. And other reasons why I guess autistic people might feel that may develop kind of that problematic use. So the need for routine and repetitiveness. So having kind of, getting a routine of that kind of substance use. A lack of suitable support and services. So again, not knowing what's out there, or I'll come on to sort of diagnosis a little bit later on, but just not knowing what support services are, or having the appropriate support services, helping managing kind of the emotions, so the lack of understanding and support as well. And within that can also become co-occurring physical and mental health conditions as well. So there's a lot there, to think about and work with, isn't it? And it's not an kind of easy subject. So I'll just talk a little bit about ADHD. Again, for some young people with ADHD, like any young people, they may experiment with substances, and they are also at great risk of developing problematic substance use as well. So some of the impulsivity, the poor judgment, potential difficulties at school that go along with ADHD may increase the risk of initiating substance misuse as well. But it's just to be clear that, however, just because a young person has ADHD, it doesn't mean that they will go on to have drug or alcohol issues. And the key is just to be kind of aware of the possible link between them and why they may search to go to use substances as well. So I'm just really going to briefly talk about a few substances and thinking about what those substances may do and what it is that sort of children, young people who are neurodiverse, what it might be that they're kind of seeking from those substances, I guess, to give us a bit of an understanding about why the link is there as well. So some of the young people that we work with who struggle with ADHD, and I guess this is the main drug that we see is cannabis. That might not surprise some of you as well. But they perhaps use it to manage some of those hyperactivity behavioural symptoms. Cannabis does have kind of depressant-like effects. So it does help the user kind of calm and feel more kind of relaxed. But there's also kind of issues in terms of kind of coordination and kind of concentration as well. There are some stimulating effects to cannabis as well, but they aren't as common as some of the kind of depressant effects as well. So in terms of the stimulant, increasing kind of blood pressure and heart rate, etc. So in terms of stimulant drugs, so obviously in terms of stimulant drugs prescribed to treat ADHD, such as Ritalin as an example for those where it thinks a medication would be of benefit. Obviously that's not the case for everyone. So they can be beneficial, but also they can be abused as well. And they may seek other substances as well, kind of recreationally. So something like speed, which is an amphetamine as well. So young people might use kind of that kind of recreationally as well, okay, as a way of kind of self-medicating basically, okay? Or if they haven't been able to get medication, they may use that as well. So risks can include things around restlessness, tremors, overactive reflexes, rapid breathing, confusion, aggression, panic attacks, kind of muscle pains as well. So there's lots of kind of risks around that as well, because obviously if they're using a substance and they're not using it under kind of they're not using it as a medication, kind of the risks increase, okay, because they're not thinking about how much they should be using. If they're using it illicitly, if someone buys some speed, for example, doesn't say how much they should use, what it actually contains. So the kind of risk of overdose are there as well. So things, if it goes beyond that, there's potential kind of irregular heart beat and potentially leading to things like heart attacks as well. Okay, I'm just going to again briefly think about alcohol. So in terms of our substance that we see, cannabis is the one I said before is what we see most referral for, and alcohol is the second. Now, in terms of young people, we don't see many young people who become dependent on alcohol, but they use it in a kind of a different way. So it's kind of that more binge drinking in terms of alcohol. Okay. So in terms of alcohol, those just give you a bit of information for those you didn't know. So it can really impact kind of brain development and functioning, the risk and reward, memory and learning. It disinhibits the lower and lowers impulsive control, social confidence, relax, euphoria, but increases risk-taking behaviours as well. And when co-occurring, individuals may find it harder to achieve kind of abstinence as well. Okay, so it kind of exacerbates kind of feelings and symptoms that are already there as well. So things around kind of low mood, anxiety, things can increase. So how people are already feeling, that can exacerbate that when people use alcohol as well. And obviously if people are under kind of medication and drinking, that's going to have a kind of a negative impact on that as well. So benzos, anti-anxiety medication. Someone who's stressed by ADHD symptoms may use benzos again to calm down because of the effects. Again, this isn't a solution. It's just sort of a sedative. And again, like I was talking a bit before, really, for a short period of time, it might help people. But actually, it's not kind of managing kind of behaviour or managing some of the issues. And when kind of sort of the drugs kind of wear off, the symptoms can often be heightened as well. Okay, okay. So I think a lot of if those of you who've been to kind of some of the other talks, the time of diagnosis as subsequent support is obviously really important. Children supported at a younger age with neurodiversity may be less likely to develop substance use disorders compared to those who begin support kind of later in life as well. So treating mental health disorders that often coexist with neurodiversity, such as anxiety, depression, is also important and may decrease the risk of substance use. So it's helping kind of develop an understanding around people's behaviour, why they might navigate to certain substances, just to be aware of that and help and support these children and young people as well to navigate that. Okay, so issues faced. So we've already talked about barriers to service. We talked, again, going back to the talk about ADHD, kind of that loop of going round and round to different services. Who's going to pick these children and young people up? Who's going to kind of take responsibility and ownership to supporting them? And we know the challenge is kind of waiting lists and diagnosis. So we know the challenges that we have. So for us as a service, it's just in terms of neurodiversity, it's just being more aware about how to work with these children and young people and trying to find the best way kind of forward and develop a better understanding as well. And like it says there, so multiple needs are often not met by one service. So what we try and do is work with other partner organisations. So we have a try and create like a wraparound service for the young person and the family as well. And the challenges with kind of attendance and kind of communication as well. So working kind of with families, with young people, thinking about the ways they would like to kind of, the best way to kind of communicate with them as well. Okay, so ways forward. So it's thinking about making sure that for ourselves, working with neurodiversity is bringing together the expertise. Working together in a coordinated way is really important. That kind of early identification, making sure there's joint planning between services and risk assessing as well. That's really important. So gathering as much information to make sure the support and the care around the young person is appropriate to their needs. Harm minimisation advice as well. So thinking about kind of reducing the risk is not meaning that we're telling or asking people to stop using, but actually just thinking about how to kind of reduce or how to manage, talking to them about what they want to get out of the support in terms of their substance misuse, so they have a really clear understanding as well. Develop flexibility in the kind of and consideration of the work that we're doing, what kind of suits their needs is really important. Showing optimism and compassion and hope and persistence as well, and recognising actually for some of these young people the progress may be slower as well, so giving that time, giving that space and having that kind of understanding as well. Working with other partners as well, so meeting with other organisations, meeting with schools for example, and making sure there's a kind of sharing kind of that kind of clear pathway to be able to support these young people. And the other thing is about making sure we work alongside families and significant kind of others. So whoever else is kind of important in their life, whoever sort of cares for them. So what we want to do is make sure that we kind of work with them and have an understanding around kind of expectations as well. So that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour in terms of substance misuse and neurodiversity and some of the work that we do. I'm just going to, so I asked one of our workers just to kind of do a bit of a case study. So it's an amalgamation of different young people that we work with. And I think this sort of demonstrates some of the kind of, I suppose, issues and some of the things that we kind of want to work towards to support these young people. So everything's kind of been kind of changed, and like I say, it's a bit of amalgamation of different young people that we have kind of worked with. Okay, so like things like initials and all sorts of things have been changed. So there's a 17-year-old, and they've actually been on a waiting list for an autism assessment for kind of several years, which is one of the issues that we've talked about. Now, this young person was smoking cannabis on a daily basis, and kind of our assessment showed that this was kind of impacting their mental health. The young person had been living with their grandparent for a couple of years. They'd kind of remained in contact with their parents, and there'd kind of been a history of kind of trauma in the family as well. This young person actually stopped going to school as well because they couldn't cope as well. And they'd been kind of, parents kind of separated when they were quite young as well. And this young person began smoking cannabis at age 14 as well. So in terms of kind of current situation for this young person, they'd been sort of smoking cannabis for about 4 years, and they hadn't really considered why they were using cannabis or didn't kind of recognise it as a problem either. And it was kind of the grandparent who'd kind of recognised there could have been a link between the potential autism diagnosis and the reasons behind that this young person was using cannabis. So they agreed in terms of kind of having having a referral to our service, and the Nan was really supportive and protective of this young person as well. And his parents sort of lived in the same town as well, which also added to kind of the situation and added to the stress as well. But the young person kind of had displaying signs of anxiety, panic attacks, difficulty managing kind of anger, frustrations, and they kind of felt that they were using cannabis to kind of block all this out. So that kind of links to what we were talking about earlier as well. So kind of escaping from those feelings. And although the young person did say that they wanted to kind of reduce their cannabis use, and thinking that using it as a as like a coping mechanism. So some of the work that we have done so far with this young person, some of the challenges: initially very quiet, answering one word, appeared almost kind of suspicious, as well. So we had to find a different way of kind of perhaps working with this young person. So making sure that regular appointments was really important to maintain that consistency. And this helped kind of improve kind of the kind of relationship and a way of kind of communicating more effectively. Involving the grandparent is really important as well in terms of building that relationship and actually spending time with the nan and the young person separately. So just finding ways to move forward, and just this kind of helped build kind of trust in that relationship as well between the worker and the young person as well. And over time learned to sort of be able to open up and talk about their feelings of anxiety, their emotions, the panic attacks, and look at alternative ways of kind of deal with these other than using cannabis as well. So part of the work we did with them was how to kind of reduce the cannabis use, as that's what they wanted. And before, the young person had kind of underplayed how much that they were sort of using. And as that trust developed, kind of more the therapeutic relationship has increased as well, and there's been kind of changes and in terms of being more kind of positive kind of outlook and sort of being able to kind of set achievable goals. So the young person has been able to kind of reduce their cannabis use a little bit, occasionally a few days without it as well. They're motivated to completely stop, but this young person has kind of motivations in terms of getting employment, has recently got an apprenticeship as well, so that's really positive. And we continue to kind of support this young person with that, and thinking about the impact potentially cannabis use could have in terms of employment sort of going forward as well. And we also spend a lot of time with the nan as well, so to help her her sort of grandson as well. We've involved other professionals, so colleges have been involved before, mental health services have been involved, so again that's been really helpful. However, because we didn't want the young person to become overwhelmed with all the services, that we've kind of in agreement kind of taken the lead on support, so things come support sort of kind of comes from us primarily. So that's been that's something I guess that we've learned from that. Because we didn't want the young person to become too overwhelmed. So going forward, again, support is still in place, but we have slowly kind of reduced that over a period of time, but it's still making good progress at the moment. All right, so that just gives you hopefully that gives you a bit of a real life case of what we're kind of working with in terms of kind of neurodiversity and kind of substance misuse, and kind of some of the stuff that I just mentioned. Hopefully you could sort of see in the presentation that I've just done. All right, so that is the kind of the end. This is kind of the end. That is the end. So there are kind of details again. We're up in the we've got a stall up there as well. So if anyone's any sort of further questions about anything that I've spoken about, you don't feel happy to ask the question here, then that's absolutely fine. We'll be around for most of the afternoon, so it would be myself, Luke, or Grant. So yeah, please come and ask us any questions that you may have. So has anyone got any questions? Or have I successfully covered everything? I shouldn't have said that, should I? But yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. And as I said, any further questions or you want any more information about what the Matthew Project does, then please feel free to come and speak to myself or Grant. So thank you very much.